The more you watch it, the funnier it gets.
Yeah, I think that's true.
It came from nowhere. Nobody was in it that anybody knew.
It's been almost 20 years since the release of this film, and yet you could take damn near any line,
Tina, you fat lard, come get some dinner.
and it's instantly recognizable.
Do fans come up to you and start imitating your Napoleon Dynamite to your face?
Right to my face, yes.
Right.
There are other comedy classics with their own run of memorable lines, some as timeless as ever.
Did we just become best friends?
Yep.
However, these are Hollywood blockbusters, films with a significant budget and a number of notable A-listers. But what if a film had essentially no familiar faces aside from the sister of a former Disney Channel star, and that one guy who you seem to recognize but can't exactly remember where? A film that, given its unfamiliar style, seemed way ahead of its time.
In that whole screening, nobody laughed. Nobody even coughed. It was like dead silence.
Yet, despite the unconventional style and extremely low budget, it would end up taking the world by storm.
Today and tomorrow we're having a Napoleon Dynamite festival. We went from probably 5 visitors a month to probably 2,000 visitors a month.
So then you wonder, how did this happen? This is quite the quirky, awkward, and at times incredibly cringe experience. But there's a magic here.
What have you got to lose? We're not anybody's right now. Like, we've got nothing to lose.
If you've ever lived or spent time in a small town, be it completely rural or the average suburb, this film can feel painfully familiar.
The moment in the film when I felt like, man, I think we're gonna be able to sell it and I think we're gonna be able to have a career was when Napoleon was walking down the street in slow motion in his thrift store suit and people started cheering for him.
It's set in rural Idaho, essentially in the middle of nowhere. This was before social media and before the era of smartphones. Aside from browsing random chat rooms to talk with women,
Napoleon, don't be jealous that I've been chatting online with babes all day.
there was essentially nothing to do. The film is incredibly reflective of that time. Since a lot of us could relate to the slow-paced lifestyle of the characters, it made it that much more enjoyable to quote.
They'll just start rattling off their favorite lines. They're like, give me your tots.
Napoleon, give me some of your tots.
No, go find your own.
This nonsensical dialogue gave us something to do. If you were either a kid or a teenager when this film was released, you couldn't escape it if you tried.
From the school to Main Street, where Vote for Pedro t-shirts still hang, and everywhere in between, tourists still flock to the tiny town.
Even if you hadn't seen it, you'd more than likely heard at least a dozen or so direct quotes in passing,
Break the wrist, walk away.
How much you want to make a bet I can throw a football over the mountains?
perhaps even memorizing a few. Entertainment in this film, like most small towns in real life, are scarce. As a result, it becomes a breeding ground for creativity. Napoleon is forced to find comfort and enjoyment in the little things. Things like dragging his action figure behind the school bus, his mythical drawings that stem from an active imagination.
What's a liger?
It's pretty much my favorite animal. It's like a lion and a tiger mixed. Bred for its skills and magic.
And a pocket full of tater tots. Even if you had more interesting plans, you might not necessarily have the money to execute them.
Napoleon, looks like you don't have a job, so why don't you get out there and feed Tina?
Why don't you go eat a decrepit piece of crap?
Neither Napoleon or Kip had a car, and their only mobility was an uncle hellbent on scamming the entire town.
So, how does the dealio sound to you?
Your Uncle Rico making $120.
Even when attempting an honest day's work, the earnings just couldn't compete.
$6. It's like $1 an hour.
This boredom, when amplified by the location and lack of resources, makes for one pretty unique personality.
You got Shocks, Pegs, Lucky.
Napoleon doesn't really fit in anywhere. This isolation has made him socially inept to the point where he seems to completely lack self-awareness. He doesn't realize that he's being uncomfortably forward.
I see you're drinking 1%. Is that because you think you're fat? Because you're not. You could be drinking whole if you wanted to.
He doesn't seem to care that he's dismissive or rude to the point of confrontation.
How was school?
Worst day of my life? What do you think?
At times, this feels totally unprovoked. The problem is, he's so used to being a punching bag, either through bullies or his day-to-day interactions, that he's conditioned to be defensive.
Freaking idiot.
Napoleon is the product of an environment that constantly rejects him.
Hey, Summer. You want to play me?
He's neither a nerd or a jock, he's just kind of there. To even the social score, he lies constantly.
What'd you do all last summer again?
I told you, I spent it with my uncle in Alaska hunting wolverines. Yeah, my old girlfriend from Oklahoma was gonna fly out here for the dance, but she couldn't because she's doing some modeling right now.
Exaggerating real-life events to project a much more exciting reality. Naturally, no one aside from those he befriends ever take him seriously.
See for yourself.
Wow.
Although he may not have the skills to hold an in-depth conversation, he is able to find people who are comfortable with a much lower standard.
Did you ride the bus to school?
No, I ride my bike.
Seeking out individuals who are equally as awkward. Pedro is the new kid. Deb eats her lunch all alone. All any of them really want is the company of a friend, and so they find it in one another.
So me and you are pretty much friends by now, right?
Yes.
But listen closely to the dialogue and you start to realize something.
We chat online for like 2 hours every day, so I guess you could say things are getting pretty serious.
This is not like most high school or coming of age films. Actors in teenage roles are usually much more animated. They tend to be overly expressive in comedies especially.
And you landed on McLovin.
Yeah, I was between that and Muhammad.
Why the f would it be between that or Muhammad?
There's a subtlety to this film that you don't usually see. Nearly every exchange is delivered flatly and with little to no expression.
I think this matches your season, Pedro.
Thank you.
It's not for a lack of talent, but rather a creative choice. These are people who live mostly boring lives with little to no social engagement outside of their core group, who aren't really used to being vulnerable beyond a surface level. What you get is this dry, at times nonsensical dialogue.
Would you like to look like this?
This is a girl.
It's supposed to be awkward. Real-life conversations aren't full of witty quips or irony. Even instances where comebacks are used, they're often hilariously dumb.
Try and earn money for college.
Your mom goes to college.
To some, this may seem boring, but if your goal is to capture the dull lifestyle of a small-town teenager, it's necessary and makes the interactions seem that much more genuine. Take Pedro and Napoleon. They're both incredibly awkward and share dialogue that doesn't really feel like anything serious.
If I win, you could be my secretary or something.
Sweet.
Neither of them have anyone to relate or talk to. They know exactly what it's like to be judged. So despite their differences, they prioritize friendship. Napoleon could barely stomach being at school or helping his family with chores, but when he's exposed to Pedro's fearlessness in the face of rejection or cringe,
who are you gonna ask?
That girl over there.
Summer Wheatley.
He begins taking initiatives he otherwise wouldn't. Things like attempting to flirt with Deb.
Hey, can I have one of your keychains?
And asking Trisha to prom.
There's a lot more where this came from. If you go to the dance with me, yours truly, Napoleon Dynamite.
I'm just calling to tell you that I can go to the dance with you.
While Pedro's fearlessness almost cost him the election,
smashing in the face of a piñata that resembles Summer Wheatley is a disgrace to you, me, and the entire gem state.
Napoleon's newfound courage, if only briefly, made him a star among his peers, all except a few. I think my favorite aspect of this movie is how they portray what I assume are the popular kids. I say that because there's a lot of sympathy here. With the exception of Don, who seems to habitually scoff at everything, it subverts the cliche where the popular kids are typically seen as antagonists. I mean, if anything, Summer and Trisha handle everything in a pretty healthy way.
See, with me, it will be summer all year long. Vote for Summer.
Especially when you consider the stakes. Trisha's mom guilts her into taking out a school outcast who drew quite the unflattering picture of her.
Took me like 3 hours to finish the shading on your upper lip.
You know you're gonna go to that dance with that boy.
Despite her protests, she has to commit. Even its most on-the-nose popular jock, Don, is still different from the usual standard. When Napoleon confronts him and throws away Summer's button, he simply brushes it off and walks away. Napoleon is both the aggressor and the antagonist here. Even when you consider the gap in popularity, they still lead very similar lives outside of school. There's so little to do in a small town and so little variety that there's really no perks for them. They live in similar houses, and given their population, their families all know one another.
Napoleon's my nephew.
Oh, that's nice.
there's not much of a social divide. Even the most glaring distinction is still somewhat justified. Towards the end, Summer and her friends are understandably bitter about the standing ovation. She made an active effort to become class president, doing so without any of the more offensive tactics utilized by Pedro, like his summer piñata. Yet, in the eyes of Napoleon's peers, his win was justified. In front of a packed auditorium, he not only stared down almost certain embarrassment, but was also completely willing to step outside of his comfort zone. This is the sort of stuff that kids who feel trapped in the mundane routine of a small town only ever dream about. This environment is meant to intensify the feeling of loneliness. Almost everyone in this film is looking for some place to belong. Uncle Rico is mentally trapped in the 80s. He hasn't adapted to the real world yet.
Man, I wish I could go back in time. I'd take state.
Kip just wants to fall in love, and Napoleon just needs a friend. The storyline itself is pretty surface level. An outcast works up the courage to save the day and becomes the school hero while also getting the girl.
I caught you a delicious bass.
But the storyline is not the main appeal. Rather, it's how genuine these characters feel, how accurately it depicts the day-to-day life of an early 2000s small-town teenager, and how awkward it can feel maneuvering the emotional minefield that is high school.
What the heck are you guys doing? Trying to ruin my life and make me look like a friggin' idiot?
This film has a cult following for a reason. Where some saw just a quotable, nonsensical comedy,
Do the chickens have large talons?
others saw a tale of loneliness and endearing friendship.
Do you think people will vote for me?
Heck yes, I'd vote for you.
Where other films fade away with the passing of time, this has stood firmly in our memory. It's proof that we don't need an absurdly high budget or over-the-top performances. You just need a crew of passionate people and a little creative spark.
If you vote for me, all of your wildest dreams will come true. Thank you.